I've hardly ever begun a year with a gloomier aspect, in a gloomier mood, nor do I expect any future of success, but a future of strife. It is dreary outside, the fields a mass of lumps of black earth and some snow, with mostly days of mist and mire in between, the red sun in the evening and in the morning, crows, withered grass, and faded, rotting green black shrubs, and the branches of the poplars and willows, rigid, like wire, against the dismal sky. This is what I see in passing, and it is quite in harmony with the interiors, very gloomy, these dark winter days. I think that if one has tried to follow the great masters attentively, one finds them all back at certain moments deep in reality. I mean, one will see their so-called creations in reality if one has similar eyes, a similar sentiment as they had. And I do believe that if the critics and connoisseurs were better acquainted with nature, their judgment would be more correct than it is now, when the routine is to live only among pictures and to compare them mutually, which, of course, as one side of the question is good in itself, but lacks a solid foundation if one begins to forget nature and looks only superficially. Can't you understand that I'm perhaps not wrong in this? And to say what I mean even more clearly, isn't it a pity that you, for instance, seldom or hardly ever go into those cottages or associate with those people or see that sentiment in the landscape which is painted in the pictures you like best? I do not say that you can do this in your position. Just because one must look long and hard at nature, one becomes convinced that the most touching things the great masters have painted still originate in life and reality itself. A basis of sound poetry, which exists eternally as a fact, and can be found if one digs and seeks deeply enough. Ce qui ne passe pas dans ce qui passe. It exists. And what Michelangelo said in a splendid metaphor, I think Millet has said without metaphor. And Millet can perhaps best teach us to see and get a faith. When I do better work later on, I certainly shall not work differently than now. I mean, it will be the same apple, only riper. I shall not change my mind about what I have thought from the beginning, and that's the reason why I say for my part, if I am no good now, I won't be any good later on either. But if later on, then now too. For corn is corn, though city people may take it for grass at first, and also vice versa. In any case, whether people approve or do not approve of what I do and how I do it, I personally know no other way than to wrestle with nature long enough for her to tell me her secret. I am very busy painting those heads. I paint in the daytime and draw in the evening. In this way I have already painted at least some 30 and drawn as many, with the result that I see a chance of doing it even better before long, I hope. I think it will be a help for the figure in general. Today I had one white and black against the flesh color. And I am also looking for blue all the time. Here the peasant figures are as a rule blue, that blue in the ripe corn or against the withered leaves of a beech hedge, so that the faded shades of darker and lighter blue are emphasized and made to speak by contrast with the golden tones of reddish brown, is very beautiful, and has struck me here from the very first. The people here instinctively wear the most beautiful blue that I have ever seen. It is coarse linen which they weave themselves, warp black, wolf blue, the result of which is a black and blue striped pattern, and when this fades and becomes somewhat discolored by wind and weather, it is an infinitely quiet, delicate tone that particularly brings out the flesh colors. Well, blue enough to react to all colors in which hidden orange elements are to be found, and discolored enough not to jar. But this is a question of color, and what matters more to me at the point I'm at now is the question of form. I think the best way to express form is with an almost monochrome coloring, the tones of which differ principally in intensity and in value. For instance, La Source by Jules Breton was painted almost in one color, but one really ought to study each color separately in connection with its contrast before one can be positively sure of being harmonious. When there was snow, I also painted a few studies of our garden. The landscape has changed much since then. Now we have splendid evening skies of lilac with gold over dark silhouettes of cottages between the masses of ruddy-colored brushwood, above which rise spare black poplars, while the foregrounds are of a faded and bleached green, varied by strips of black earth and pale withered rushes along the ditch edges. I certainly see all this too. I think it just as superb as anybody else. But I am even more interested in the proportion of a figure, the division of the oval of the head, and I cannot master the rest before I have a better grip on the figure. Well, first comes the figure. I personally cannot understand the rest without it. And it is the figure that creates the atmosphere,